Hello, class. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person this week to talk to you about SQL functions. Hopefully, this presentation of seeing the slides, hearing me talk through them, going through some examples will not be too different from what you experience in class. And thank you for being flexible with this instructional method. So our topic this week is SQL functions, and we have a lot of new keywords to teach you that are all new SQL functions. Now you all are familiar with SQL functions because you've been using them in Excel for years, right? You've seen some. You've done if statements in ISM 120. You've maybe even done VLOOKUPs, min, max. There's lots of functions that you use in Excel that allow you to see mathematical functions of groups of numbers in Excel or to look up values from other sheets. Lots of functionality can be accomplished in Excel spreadsheets with functions. SQL is no different. SQL has its own share and set of functions. There are many, many, many of them. We'll learn a handful of them today. So one numeric function, a handful of string functions, and then two other functions. And you'll use these in the in-class activity and in this week's My Educator assignment. So aggregate functions, which these are the ones that you might be the most familiar with their equivalents of in Excel. We are not going to be talking about them today because these are special types of functions that aggregate values. Some count min, max, and average, and so hang on, and we will teach you those, but you'll have to wait for a future week. Now, with all of these functions in SQL, we want to use aliases. Aliases are alternative names that we give to tables or columns in our query results. And without aliases, you're going to see very cryptic column headings in your query results, and we want those column headings to be descriptive and meaningful and useful. So we want to give aliases to all of the columns that we put in our query output that contain functions. And every example that I go through today will use an alias. When we're doing aliases for field names, we want to use the as keyword. First function is the round function. And this does exactly what you think it would. It rounds a numeric value to a certain number of decimal places. And so the round function is written in all caps. All of our SQL functions are SQL keywords, so they get written or typed in all caps. And all functions are going to contain a set of parentheses. And inside of those parentheses go arguments, just like it works in Excel. So after the round keyword, we have an opening and a closing set of parentheses. Inside of there, we're going to define what attribute is it that we want to round, followed by a comma, followed by how many numbers do we want after the decimal place. So our first example here is going to round the sale price to the nearest dollar. Say I'm not concerned with quarters and nickels and dimes and pennies. I just want to see the sale price rounded to the nearest dollar, thus the comma 0 that you see there. Also note that we are giving this an alias of rounded sale price, and since that alias has spaces in it, we have to surround that with double quotes. If rounded sale price were one word and I didn't put those spaces in there, those quotation marks would not be necessary. This data is coming from the sale table, and we just want to see rounded sale prices that are less than $20. So let me open up my query editor for you. There it is, and my queries. Great. I'll paste in this query and run it for you. So here are our rounded sale prices. Notice that we're not getting anything after the decimal place. I'm going to want to modify this in a couple of ways. First way is I want to get rid of the alias, and this is to demonstrate why we use aliases in queries that have functions. If I get rid of that alias, I'm still going to get the same numbers in here, but watch what happens up here to my column title. See that? It's that, nasty raw function that I'm typing in. I don't want that to be my column heading. That's why I use the alias. Second, just to show you what the round function is doing, let's get rid of it and just show you the raw sale price without any function, and we should see some decimal places appear after those numbers because those numbers are no longer rounded. So that is what the round function does. And let's look at another function in SQL. The upper function. So all of these, 5 or 6 next functions I'll be showing you all have to do with text, right? The round function clearly is doing something to numbers, but these next 5 or 6 all have to do with text. The upper function changes all text to uppercase, okay? So say that we had our state code in the database not all the time with all caps, and so when we're outputting reports, sometimes we're seeing AZ written lowercase a, lowercase z. Sometimes we're seeing it written in all caps. Sometimes we're seeing it written capital A, lowercase z. So let's pretend that our data looked like that. If that were the case, I want it to all look uniform and show a capital letter for the A and the z. And so I can use the upper function, which you see in the third row of my query results. Upper is the name of the function. It's written in all caps because it's a SQL keyword. And then inside of the parentheses are what field is it that I want to change to uppercase. I want to change the state field from the manufacturer table. Again, I want to give this an alias of state code in this example so I don't see a cryptic function heading in my query results. And since my alias does not have a space in it, I'm not required to surround it inside of double quotes. So here's our query code pasted in, and if I run this, we should see all of these state codes in the final column written in all caps, and we do. The next query I'll be teaching you is the opposite of upper. Shouldn't surprise anybody that we have a lower function, and I'm just going to modify this query for the time being to demonstrate how that works. We should see all lowercase in the state code column now with the lower function. Go back and show you another example. Here it is. The lower function is used to change all text to lowercase. So say that we have a column in our database for color. We want to use it, in marketing materials, and we want that to show up in all lowercase. So with this function, we can make that happen. Lowercase product color, and I'm giving it an alias with a space in it, thus my double quotes coming from the product table. And so I will paste in this query into the editor, and let's see what this does to color. Here, lowercase color. Now I left color in the database so we could see the difference, what lowercase color is doing. Even when there are multiple capital letters like animal print, A and P are capitalized, all of that's going to be changed to lowercase. Everything in this rightmost column should be all lowercase, but you might see capital letters in the raw color column. Very good. Next function is the length function. Sometimes you're concerned with how many characters are in a given field. So say we are putting together a product catalog and we need to ensure that all of our product descriptions will fit in the little box on that catalog or on the web page, and those descriptions need to be no more than 100 characters. We could look at the length of the description field for all of the products, the shoes in the database, with the length function. Length written in all caps because it is a SQL keyword, and then inside of the parentheses is which field is it that we want to retrieve the length for. I'm giving this an alias of description length, and let's give this a run in our query editor. So here are our results for the products, their description, and how many characters are in that description field. So if our limit was 150, we would clearly need to reduce the description length of several of these pairs of shoes. And we're hitting the limit. the limit of a varchar field, which I assume the description is 255. So these ones that are hitting 255, it looks like there should be more text following that. That's why we're hitting that threshold. The concat function is short for concatenate. Concatenate. And to concatenate means to take two strings and treat them as if they were one single string or one single collection of characters, alphabet letters or numbers. So the last name and the first name in the employee table are in two separate fields, employee last name and an employee first name. What if I wanted a column that showed me the employee's first name and the last name in one single column? Well, I can use the concat function to do that. The concat function takes in two arguments separated by a comma inside of the parentheses. And so in this example, I'm taking the first name and then I am concatenating onto that the last name. This is going to give me one single column called full name at the end. And a lot of students want to know, all right, if we're concatenating first name and last name, do they need to be in the query? They do not. I do not need to show last name and first name in my query output in order to concatenate it. I could just have this single line in the select statement and it would run just fine. The reason I'm keeping last name and first name in here is just for demonstration purposes so you can see what it's doing to those two fields. Let's open up our editor and paste in that query. Okay, so Lewis McDougald, Audrey McLeod. Notice what's happening here in full name. We are in fact turning those two fields into one single field by concatenating them. And I know the first thing you're noticing is that doesn't look nice, Dr. Weber. There should be a space between the first name and the last name. I agree, this isn't the best way to present. And this is a limitation of the concat function. You might think, oh, couldn't we just like concatenate in a space here? So it's going to be first name and then a space and then last name. If we run this, we'll get an error. And that's because the concat function can only take two arguments. All right, so how do we get that space in there using the concat function? What we have to do is nest the concat function inside of another concat function like I have done here. So let's start with the innermost concat function, just what I have highlighted here. What's going on there? I'm sorry, here. What's going on here? I am concatenating the employee's first name with a single space. So my name, David Weber, I would get David space. David space. That's what I have highlighted here. Now the outside concat function, what am I doing here? I'm taking that David space and I'm concatenating it with last name or Weber. So we should get David space Weber as full name. This is the way to get around the limitation that the concat function can only concatenate two strings. So here I'm getting that nicely formatted first name space last name. Now that's not the cleanest way of doing things. This slide is just showing that last example I gave of nesting concat functions inside of each other. But there's a cleaner way, and that's by using the concatenation operator. The concatenation operator is not a function, but it does the job of one, you could say. And the concatenation operator is two pipe characters. The pipe is a character you rarely ever type from your keyboard. And you type it by holding down the shift key and typing a backslash. So that's the character that's between the backspace and the enter key on your keyboard. Shift, and that creates this vertical long bar that we call the pipe. And two pipes next to each other, there's not a space in between there, it's two pipes right up against each other. That does the function of the concat function. And so let's see how it's used down here. I'm taking the employee's first name and I'm concatenating it with a single space. That's a single quote, a space, and a single quote. What's inside of there? A single space. To that, I'm concatenating on the employee's last name. Again, I'm giving this an alias of full name so that it looks nice in my query results. And let's see what this would look like when I run it. There it is. Run that query, and it's going to look exactly the same. My output's going to look the same. My column heading's going to look the same. It's just different in how I achieved that result. I think that the concatenation operator is easier to use than the concat function, but they are both there available for your use. If you're asked to do concatenation in a problem or on an exam, it will be clear. It will say use the concatenation operator, which is the double pipes, or it will say use the concat function, which is the all caps concat that we learned first. Next, substr. All right, that's kind of a mouthful. What's going on there? That is a abbreviated way to say substring. Substring. This is, you would use this when you want a portion of a string field. A portion of a string field. A string is a collection of characters. What if I want some of the characters at the end, some of the characters at the beginning, some of the characters in the middle? Here's where substring comes in. Substring takes 3 arguments. The first argument you give it after the opening parentheses is which field is it that you want a substring from, followed by a comma, followed by where in that string do you want the characters, followed by how many characters do you want. Now the location, the middlemost argument of that, is a zero-based number. We learned about zero-based counting when we talked about conversion between binary and decimal. And so we don't start counting with 1, we start counting with 0. So the first character in any text field, any char field, any varchar field, is going to be at index location 0. Let me show you an example of what this looks like. Say I have the phrase hello space world exclamation point. The capital H in that string is not location 1. And I know that's confusing. Wait, but isn't it the first letter in hello world? It is. Even though it's the first letter, and we would certainly count that as 1, 2, 3, 4, we start counting at the number 0. So that H in hello world is at index location 0. And we count from there. So even though there are 12 characters in here, the exclamation point is at index location 11. So let's look at some examples. What if we wanted the substring of this field here, this hello world field, 0, 2. So 0 means where do we start? We're going to start here at this H. 2 means how many characters? H-E, 2 characters. If I wanted capital H, lowercase e, this is how I would get it. You don't always need to start at the beginning. Substring field 3, 4. That means starting at index location 3. This second lowercase l, I want 4 characters. Lowercase l, lowercase o, a space, and a capital W. These 4 characters here in the middle of the string, I would get them with a 3 and a 4 arguments. How about this? 11, 1. 11 means start at this index location, so starting at this exclamation point, I want 1 character. What's that going to give me? An exclamation point, and only the exclamation point. Now, we can use negative numbers for the location. With negative numbers for the location, we count moving leftward from the far left. So at index location -1, -2, -3, -4, we're going to start with this R. R and L. R and L. That's what the -4 and 2 would give us. So when would this make sense? How does this benefit me if I am creating queries? Well, let's look at an example that might be useful. Say that we have codes for our customers by their last names, right? My last name, Weber, W-E-B-E-R, and just the first 3 letters of my last name are used for some last name code, W-E-B. And so if I wanted to do that, I could use the substring function. So taking the last name, starting at index location 0, so the leftmost character of that W, give me 3 characters, 0, 3. That's what that's going to do. And so let's run that in the query editor and see what that looks like. Here we go. So this might be helpful if we also can see the full customer's last name. So let's include that in the query results and see exactly what's going on here. So Marios Koufaris sounds like a Greek last name. The last name code is going to be the first 3 letters of Marios's last name. And Elmer Finch, F-I-N, great, we're getting that here. So that's how we can use the substring function. And I have one more example here. You know that zip codes, I don't know, 15 years ago added a 4-character extension to help the post office in delivering our mail. And so what if I wanted those last 4 digits of a customer's postal code? I could start at 4 characters from the rightmost character and give me 4 characters. Now I won't run this example because I don't think that the data in the database here have the 4-digit extension on the zip code, but just another example of where the substring function would come in useful. Next, the replace function. What if I want to change some of the text in a char or a varchar field? The replace function lets me do that. I need to give it 3 arguments. First, what field is it that I want to replace? Next, what is the text that I want to replace, and what do I want to replace it with? And so in this example, let's say that every time I have a manufacturer in CA, I don't want to show CA in the query results. I want to show the entire state name, California, typed out, written out from the manufacturer table. And so let's see how that would work. Opening up my query editor and pasting in that query. Now this is only going to change California. If I wanted to replace all those other states, I'd have to add functionality for all of that. So Torrance, California, Los Angeles, California, Chino, Citrus Heights. Every time that California or CA is in my state, I have replaced that with the entire text California. That's how the replace function works. And I have one more example for you for the replace function. Let's say that, all right, the spelling of the word gray, I think this is how they spell it in the UK and other parts of the world, but the more common spelling of the color gray in America is with the letter A. And so let's say I want to replace all instances where the color is listed as G-R-E-Y with G-R-A-Y. Say I'm doing a catalog for all of my American customers. That makes more sense to use the American spelling. If I was doing one for my English customers, my British customers, I'd swap those. I won't run this, but you can see what that would do. It would change every instance of gray with an E with gray with an A. Okay, the last 2 functions are pretty simple, and these ones don't have parentheses, but I still wanted to include them. These are more operators than they are functions, but I wanted to include them in this lecture. Is null. So is null is not used in the select clause. This is going to be used in the where clause to find missing data or where there's nothing listed for a particular field. So let's say I'm going and I'm editing my product catalog, all these shoes in the database, and I want to ensure that every shoe in my database has a color listed. I don't want it to be blank for a color. Every shoe has a color, right? Even if it's just white, I want that to be listed in the color. So I want to find out what those shoes are that don't have colors listed so I can go in and edit that catalog information to give it a color. I will run this for you and we can see what that's going to output for me. Query editor. There we go. Great. Run that. Okay, so this is giving me all of the columns, all of the fields in the table because I used the asterisk. And notice here in the color column, all of these shoes, there's, I don't know, 10 of them or so, 10 different shoes in our database that don't have anything listed for color. All right, now I know where I can go and I can modify these to give them their color values. The opposite of the is null operator is not null. This is going to give me the opposite of this. So I won't see any of the shoes that have a null value for color. I will only see shoes that do have a value for color. Great. So nothing in this column where my mouse is should be empty, and it's not. Great. So that's the is null and is not null operators, and that's the last one I have to teach you today. You should be able now, with everything in this presentation, to go through and complete the in-class activity and be able to complete the next My Educator assignment that uses SQL functions. And if you come across a question where you're stuck on in the in-class activity or in the assignment, just take a look back through this video, watch through the examples, and hopefully that can get you back on the right track. All right, class, I look forward to being with you again in person when I return, and thanks again for your flexibility in being taught this way.